The friendly skies. I had always hated flying. I wasn't really afraid of crashing. I just hated sitting in such a small, cramped space for so long. It's not like a car. You can't pull over and step out for a break somewhere or something. You're stuck. Sitting in between or next to strangers for hours on end. Being at the mercy of their foot odor and bad breath. Praying to God that you yourself don't have bad breath that you can't smell. Things had only gotten worse over the years. Seats grew smaller and smaller. Legroom is becoming obsolete. Security lines are longer than ever. In pre-9/11 world, my then fiance used to stay with me at the gate until I took off. Then she'd go home. Now, as my wife, she just nods her head sleepily as I gather my stuff together and arrive at the airport 3 hours too early. So I mentioned I hate flying. Unfortunately, I do a lot of it. I work for a company that requires me to fly a few times a month to different clients and help them set up and review software. It's a good paying gig, and they always put me up in a nice hotel. But the traveling sucks. On this particular morning, I'd made the mistake of drinking far too heavily the night before. I rarely ever drink heavily because I hate the way it makes me feel. Funny how in fleeting moments we forget this stuff. Oh Lord, how I remembered though, as we boarded the Southwest flight and I inhaled the ripe smell of BO and someone's onion bagel. Saying my stomach lurched would be an understatement. Now, I have never thrown up on a plane, and I really hoped that this wouldn't be my first experience. I plopped down in an aisle seat, just in case I did need to try and make it to the bathroom. A woman and her small child sat next to me. Is it something about me? I mean, do I have a friendly face that just screams, I love kids. Kids are my favorite. Bring them over. Because it seems that I frequently end up seated around children. Thankfully, this kid was pretty quiet. He just sat staring at his mom, playing with his little chubby fingers. As my head pounded, I took a look around the plane. There was an elderly couple sitting across the aisle from me. The wife seemed to be fussing about him not having his seatbelt on yet. Seated behind them was a young man who couldn't have been more than 16. And he was wearing a pair of those weird-looking Apple AirPod thingy-majigs as he stared out the window, probably hoping no one would sit next to him and start talking to him. I feel you, bud. There were 2 people behind me. I didn't want to turn and look at them, but they were whisper arguing. You know, the type of arguing where you can't not argue, like you just have to get in the last word that doesn't end up being the last word, and you can't control yourself, but you don't want other people around you to know that you're arguing with someone, so you both whisper, and you just pretend that people can't really hear you, but they really can. By the time we finally took off, the little boy sitting next to me was fast asleep, and so was the old man across the aisle, snoring away. I wished I could sleep. It wasn't nighttime, but I'd gotten up mega early and was so tired. Not to mention nauseated, and of course the raging migraine from the booze. I've never been able to sleep, though, on an airplane. 20 minutes into the 4-hour flight, the flight attendant began pushing her cart down the aisle to deliver pretzels and drinks. I opted for a ginger ale and sucked on a few of the tiny pretzels, hoping the sodium might somehow make me feel better. I handed the woman who was sitting at the window her drink and pretzels, and she kept some off to the side for when her son woke up. As the attendant was pushing her cart back by me to get back to the galley, we hit a bit of turbulence, and she literally fell over. I stood up quickly and pulled her upwards. "Thank you, sir. Yes, I'm all right," she said. "But please, you should buckle in. I think we're in for some rough air." And with that, she quickly pushed the cart back to where it belonged and sat in her own seat. Great, I thought. Awesome for my hangover. I looked at the little boy. If he wakes up and throws up, I'm gonna throw up, I thought. I strapped in. Things were okay for about 20 minutes. All of a sudden, we hit some really rocky air. So rocky that it woke up the little boy and the old man. In fact, I think it woke everybody up. To be honest with you, it was so rough that it startled me in such a way that if my stomach was still feeling nauseated, I couldn't even tell, because all I could think about was how my fingers were starting to cramp from gripping the armrest so hard. The plane shook violently. An announcement from the cabin came over the loudspeaker, saying we were experiencing a bit of turbulence, and for everyone, including flight attendants, to please stay in their seats with their seatbelts on. No shit, I thought. The little boy was clinging to his mom and whimpering. Poor kid. I looked around. The older couple looked terrified. The teenager, the one with the AirPods in, had taken them out and was frantically looking around the plane. We made eye contact. We both nodded weirdly and awkwardly, and then looked away, not sure what to say or do. The whisper arguers behind me were silent. Suddenly, the shaking stopped. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, which only lasted about 2 minutes before it started up again, even more violently. A bag flew out of the overhead bin and landed in the empty seat next to AirPod Boy. The older couple held hands tightly, and it looked like they were crying. I also heard crying coming from behind me. I took a chance and peeked through the crack in my seat. The whisper arguers were a young couple, and they were clinging to each other for dear life, terrified. I felt the little boy next to me grab for my hand. I let him hold it. I looked at his mother, and she was terrified. Like, I really looked at her. She couldn't have been older than very early 20s. Such a young woman. She was holding his other hand. The pilot came over the loudspeaker again and told everyone, oddly, not to panic, to just hold on to anything we could. To me, it was the voice of a man who wasn't sure what was going to happen. It felt like we were dropping. My stomach lurched again, and my legs were shaking. Yeah, we were for sure going down. I could hear a deafening noise. The masks popped out of the ceiling. I heard loud crying. I think everyone was too afraid to scream. I think I heard at least one person vomit. And then it went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was alone on the plane. It was still. I think we were on the ground. I looked around and there was no one to be found. As I stood up and walked towards the front, a flight attendant popped out of nowhere and was startled to see me. "Sir, how did you get on the plane? They haven't even started boarding yet." I've always been on here. What do you mean? Where is everyone? Where is everyone? She shook her head. "Sir, this is the first flight of the day. We haven't even boarded anyone yet." I shook my head. "What time is it? What time is it?" "Sir, it's 6:50 a.m. I shook my head. No, it has to be at least noontime. We were almost to Atlanta when the plane started shaking." She looked at me very nervously. Behind her, passengers were starting to file slowly into the plane. I watched them as she was trying to speak to me, and I wasn't hearing what she was saying. One by one, they filed in and sat down in their seats. I felt someone grab my arm as I looked around. None of these people were the people that were on the plane with me. I felt myself being dragged off the plane by security. I was asked a lot of questions that I couldn't answer. I think, honestly, the only reason why I wasn't arrested for having been on that plane without going through security or showing my ID is that to them I sounded insane. But I was evaluated, and other than my airplane experience, I was perfectly fine. So they just chalked it up to a one-time thing. My doctor thinks that maybe I drank too much the night before and it mixed with some of my medication that I take for my health issues, and it just had some sort of weird effect. And I imagined the whole thing. But that doesn't explain how I got on the plane. Because I was on the right flight number. I was physically on the right plane. I was supposed to be on the plane, but I got in trouble because I was on it without having actually gone through the proper steps to get on it. And I don't even care about that. I care about knowing how I got on and where everyone went. I feel like I was on a ghost plane in the friendly skies. And to be honest with you, I'm a little bit worried that a part of me is still out there somewhere, trapped in another dimension on this plane. Or I'm the only one that escaped the dimension, and all the other people are trapped out in the dimension somewhere, like the Bermuda Triangle. I just can't explain it. And it terrifies me. Now, nothing like that has ever happened again. And I do still fly, but I'll never forget that. I'll never forget the people on the plane. They were real to me. It really didn't seem like a hallucination. I just can't explain it.